This episode of the School Zone podcast is brought to you by School Spirit Vending, hassle-free year-round fundraising for your school. At School Spirit Vending, we do all the work. You cash the check.
Welcome to the School Zone podcast, your source for the most creative and innovative ways to school fundraise and impact your kids. Now, here's your host, Matt Miller.
Hey, School Zone podcast listeners, Matt coming at you. Excited to have my good friend Daniel Bauer on tonight. Daniel hails from one of my favorite places on the planet, none other than Chicago, Illinois. I grew up about 60 miles west of the city and love getting back every chance that I can. He works in the Chicago Public Schools as an assistant principal for Brooks College Prep. And he's also the founder and head of Better Leaders, Better Schools. The organization is designed to connect excellent leaders in education and promote leadership development. Daniel's passion is developing staff members to their fullest potential. There's nothing greater than this. The impact of a highly functioning staff can have on a student body and the community is priceless. Better Leaders, Better Schools. Daniel Bauer, say hey to the School Zone podcast audience.
School Zone podcast audience, how are you? Daniel from Chicago. And Matt, what is your going rate for voiceovers? I love how you introduced me.
We'll have to talk about that, man. We'll talk about that offline. I'm not that good, so.
No, you are. We'll have to figure out some type of negotiation.
So, Daniel, give a little bit more background on you. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last number of months. We're part of a mastermind together, and I was blessed to have an opportunity to be on your podcast, Better Leaders, Better Schools, here a while back. That's what kind of started the relationship, and, of course, we've hung out on several occasions since then. But for those in the audience that really don't know a whole lot about you, give a little backstory and how we've really come to this point of getting a chance to chat.
You know, back in high school, I just so loved working with my peers and seeing that metaphorical light bulb go off. And at that point, I knew that I wanted to be in some type of industry where you just help people and develop them. At the time, too, my best friend, his family lived kitty corner to our house, and his father worked for the stock exchange here in Chicago, and they were doing very well financially, we'll say. But he had profound influence on my life, and he said, if I could do it all over again, Daniel, I would be a teacher. And it really floored me because this was a family that had everything I didn't. You know, both parents were together, just a loving family. They had no needs that were going unfulfilled, you know. But to hear somebody who is doing so well to say there's much more to life, and that's so much about like the DNA that's in you and our mutual friend Aaron Walker, just the idea of doing something not just for success but for significance, that really stuck with me as a young man. And I was very fortunate when I went to college. I had my mind made up that I was going to be in education. Fast forward 12, 13, 14 years as a teacher, and people started calling out my leadership gifts. I really started to study that, got a master's in school leadership, and then that helped me pivot to an instructional coach position where you're just coaching teachers, helping them be more effective in the classroom. And then after that, I moved into full-blown administration as an assistant principal, and that's where I'm at now, and I just love it. The organizational side of things, making sure operationally the school's running, you know, like a well-oiled machine. But at the end of the day, what really has me like extremely passionate is just helping, again, develop people. And that's working with teachers, giving them great feedback, and really talking about goals, you know, not so much even the evaluation side of stuff because that gets sticky, but asking people like why. Remember when we were at that View from the Top meetup in Texas, why are you here? And asking those questions to my educators and then establishing goals from that and holding them accountable to trying to achieve it.
So have you been embraced by kind of the establishment? Because, I mean, that's common sense business practice oftentimes.
Right.
But the educational system, I've always had the impression, is kind of a completely different animal. So,
And by a different animal, you mean backwards, right? Like you can fill in the blank backwards, but we're so slow to incorporate best practices or things that work. And maybe that's me inside my own bubble and just wanting to push things faster and be more effective, be more efficient. But yeah, I mean, it's a slow road, and I just have to keep telling myself it's a marathon and not a sprint. Because to get to your original question, like, have I been embraced? Maybe slowly. But the big reason I launched Better Leaders, Better Schools, and the backstory there was really just a frustration. I was sick of trying to get people, and by people I mean school leaders, to talk about, really, come on, man, what's working at your school? I don't want to hear the story that you want to tell, right? I want you to be real with me. I want you to be authentic and vulnerable. Pull back the curtain. Let me see behind what's going on. And having those conversations was very, very, very difficult. And they didn't happen consistently enough. And so I launched the blog and the podcast so I could attract and connect with people who wanted to have those conversations. Because my hypothesis was, if I exist, there's got to be people like me. And if I zoom out of Chicago, even though it's the third largest school district in the nation, I got to have people to connect with. And that hypothesis has proved true. And I think if people want to really dig into school leadership and they check out the Better Leaders, Better Schools podcast, they'll be very happy with what they find.
So where do you think some of the biggest areas of lack? Well, what are some of those areas that you see today? Aside from being authentic with what's really going on, what are some things that you think could very easily be fixed, with awareness through your program?
Well, the interesting thing, when you're talking about business and entrepreneurs, a lot of them will talk about failing fast, right? And learning from your mistakes, and that failure is a good thing. That's slowly starting to be incorporated into the educational philosophy. But at the end of the day, I don't think failure is looked at as a good thing in schools. And the stakes are extremely high. We're working with our most precious resource in the nation, which is our children. But on the other hand, if you want to talk about how schools haven't changed for hundreds of years and it's a outdated model, blah, 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 you could YouTube it and Google it and get the whole backstory there, factory model, et cetera, et cetera. Well, you're going to have to be able to take some risks and fail and learn from those mistakes. I just think with the high stakes testing, with the level of accountability that schools are under, people aren't afforded the ability to make those mistakes and learn from them. They're fired way before that even happens. You look at, an average tenure of a superintendent, and the running joke there, and even with principals to an extent, is you're hired just to be fired. You know that it's not going to be a long-term play. But on the flip side, you read about Jim Collins and good to great companies. And again, this is just common sense, but for the long-term success of any organization, you got to have a leader that's mentored and coached and developed, and there has to be some type of longitudinal experience, right, that he or she has, because they need to be there for a while to actually see things through, see if these initiatives, these ideas that they're trying to put into play and grow to fruition, if it'll actually work. But a lot of times the plug is pulled way too prematurely on that, and it's just people reinventing the wheel all the time, and you're never able to see if it really even was going to work. So one of the things I'm really focused on now, it's come up in a book I read called Leaders Eat Last with Simon Sinek. And did we read that with the Masterminds?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So that's where I grabbed that book, and then I just downloaded on Audible, Smarter, Faster, Something by Charles Duhigg. And both of those books are talking about the importance of safety, and that by creating safety for your people to experiment, to be honest that, hey, man, I messed up here. What are we going to do? Like, if you don't have that type of culture, you're never going to grow to anything special. You're just always going to survive. You're never going to thrive.
Wow, that's good stuff. How do you make that change, like you said, in I know down here in Texas, I mean, the testing seems to control everything. And, I know there's a lot of incredible educators and administrators that are getting as creative as they can within those boundaries. But how do you kind of work against that and work towards more realism?
Yeah, I don't know, because it's so easy for politicians to talk about those test scores. It's just such an easy metric to compare states to states and our country versus others, and they want to get elected, and hold their position there. So I'm not quite sure what to do with that. I think if we could start a discussion about having a more holistic way to rate schools, so that it's so much more than tests, and you're including campus safety. If kids are going to college, and when they go to college, do they actually finish? I personally am a big believer in portfolios. So a kid demonstrates the 4 years that I have them. Here's what they were doing when they walked in the door, and here's how they've matured. I mean, those type of things will absolutely illustrate the growth of a student. And I just think we need a more holistic model there. But then going back to the safety thing that I brought up, I think that just, it all starts with the leader, right? You got to model the things that you want, and you got to ask people to hold you accountable. And I think when you model and you say stuff like, hey, I don't have all the answers, or guys, will you really go over this with a fine-tooth comb? Like, show me where the mistakes are. I want this to be the highest quality ever. You're just opening yourself up for criticism, and show that it's okay. That's where we start. It starts with the leader.
Awesome. A lot of it too, I know my dad, both my mom and dad were award-winning educators in the state of Illinois for years.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that made them special is the fact that they chose not to play the game.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
In fact, that's kind of where I inherited that whole thing. I'm not a politician. I never will be. And, my dad did what he felt was right. His sole focus was educating the kids, and nothing else really mattered.
Yeah.
And he didn't play the game. He didn't go to the cocktail parties. He didn't do any of that stuff. He just went to work, did his job, went home, and spent time with his family. But because of that, he was able to do things his own way within the guidelines that were set for him. And he was, teacher of the year in the state, as was my mom, each, back a number of years ago, because of their willingness to take some risks and to not necessarily follow the herd.
And I think something too, probably that'd be true of both your parents. I know it's true of you and me. You got to have some type of moral compass or core purposes that really guide your work. You know what I mean? Because you're going to get pressure from outside forces. And when you're going against the grain sometimes, are you going to waver from what you know and believe to be right? And so if you have that strong centering, that foundation of what really drives your work, you're going to be okay. And for me, a core foundation of that is just the idea of love, and I'll tell students, I'll tell teachers, the mastermind I run for school leaders, I tell those people that I love them. And that could be sometimes uncomfortable, make folks uncomfortable. And, I don't mean it in any way other than like, I care about you. And then the faith that we share, I believe you were created in God's image. And that means you are really special to me. And so I got to figure out how to connect with you and how to serve you in the best possible way. And that's really like a guiding principle in my life.
Wow, that's awesome. So Daniel, let's take a short break. And when we come back, I want you to share more specifically about Better Leaders, Better Schools, what you do, what some of your programs are, and kind of what the focus is of your podcast.
Most teachers and administrators not only want their kids to have developed minds, but opportunities to develop creativity, positive human values, and a sense of personal excellence. But your budget doesn't allow for all of it. You need fundraising. At School Spirit Vending, we are helping a growing number of elementary schools fundraise the easy way, and we do all the work. We provide the sticker vending machine, free customized school logo stickers, licensed and non-licensed stickers like NFL and Disney, as well as tons of other fun stickers that are relevant to kids. The best part? School Spirit Vending is free. No upfront expenses for schools at all. A percentage of machine revenue goes directly to the school, PTA, or PTO each month. And did I say customized stickers? Our skilled graphics team can help custom design your school spirit stickers. You just tell us what you want. The only thing you do is provide us a busy hallway or commons area. Oh, and you'll have to find the time to cash a monthly check. It doesn't get any easier than that. 2,000 elementary schools can't be wrong. To see for yourself how easy year-round, hassle-free fundraising can be, go to schoolspiritvending.com/schoolzone. You've been listening to the School Zone podcast, your source for the most creative and innovative ways to school fundraise and impact your kids. Now, back to Matt.
All right, we're back with none other than Daniel Bauer, Better Leaders, Better Schools. So Daniel, take a minute to share a little bit more about your podcast and your platform, where you're headed with that and what you do today to provide value and to provide the opportunity to develop as leaders with your program.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. And, earlier I talked about, how Better Leaders, Better Schools was birthed out of my frustration of connecting with school leaders. But the podcast really was for me. I'm glad that people listen to it. And as of right now, the day we're talking, I'm about to cross over 22,000 downloads, and I'm proud of that. And when I look at my strengths through Strength Finders 2.0, number one is an activator, but number two is a learner. And so I just want to pick people's brains about how they lead effective schools that are really pushing the needle for student achievement and school success. And so, anybody that wants to check out that podcast, it's really about leadership within schools, whether you're a teacher, an instructional coach, or an administrator. Heck, even a parent or a student can learn from it. I think those principles are very general. But that's what you're going to get with the podcast. That's free. The blog, same type of thing. That's just me verbally and mentally dumping, what I think is important. And then, hopefully people find value in it. But outside of that, I run a mastermind for school leaders. Right now I have one with some really amazing people. And we get together every Tuesday and we just talk about wins from the week. And we talk about a leadership book that we're reading. And then we also have the opportunity to discuss our challenges and obstacles. So somebody gets the hot seat and then they just share that stuff. And the best part is they get objective feedback, people that don't have any stake in the game except that person's success, who could offer critical observations and ask really good questions to really have you get a 360-degree view and perspective over what you're dealing with. And the best part was, I was really nervous going into it. I knew I had the skill set to facilitate a mastermind, but it was priceless to hear after the first one. Like literally everybody texted me and they said, wow, that was way better than what I expected. So that's a big thing that I offer, and that's a paid for service. I'm flirting with some other ideas. I go to a conference, I'll probably type up some notes and you could just name your price on that and, pay whatever and grab the notes if you find benefit there. And then another thing that I just started is something called a leadership sprint. I'm going to run that every quarter, once a quarter. And really, it's a 2.5-hour leadership experience where I do 8 videos where I talk about leadership from a variety of perspectives. It's run through the Slack app, which are you familiar with Slack by any chance?
I am, and I think I got started a little bit early. They didn't have some of the functionality that they do now.
Gotcha.
And I haven't gotten set up on it, but I hear nothing but rave reviews from everybody that I know who uses it.
Yeah, let me just back up there real quick. The way we use it at my school, or we're piloting it, for our most struggling students, I created a Slack team, and each student has their own channel, so to speak. And so all the teachers that are involved with that student, instead of sending a mass email and then replying, hey, did I reply all or whatever, it's just everybody talks about that kid right there. And we don't all have the same time off during the day. So it just really helped facilitate communication around that kid to help them succeed. You can share documents, post homework, all those things that the kid needs to be successful. But going back to the leadership sprint, that is run through Slack because it's such a great communication tool. And what I'll do is I'll drop in those 8 videos one at a time. And then after a short, 3 to 5 minute video, I have different question prompts. And those are either solo writing or group writing activities. And it's just a place, again, to be authentic, vulnerable, to think about leadership in a deep way. You might make some new friends in the chat room as well. And hopefully it's just another way to just get inspired. Right now we're talking, it's the end of the school year. You might need a little more energy, but at the beginning of the year, you might just need a little bit of a kick in the butt to just get like extra excited about what's happening at your school. And so people can check that out at betterleadersbetterschools.com/sprint.
Talk a little bit more about the Mastermind, because that's a term that most people are not familiar with. You and I have become familiar with it just because we've been part of one for quite some time. So share a little bit more about the thought process and the benefit of that to anybody out there who may be looking for some accountability and a support structure to help them continue to grow in their leadership skill set.
Yeah, well, school zone listeners or anything like me, we always think that we have the best idea. But the best thing about a mastermind is that you share those things within community. And that goes back to our faith too, where I think, life is just meant to be done in community. And you're just going to get that great feedback and those great questions that help you really think through and process whatever it is you're trying to do. So for me in the school leader context, it's a regular 1 hour meeting every single week. And again, we're gonna share what are some of the struggles, what are the wins from the week, just to kind of get the ball rolling. Like I said, we read different leadership books and really try to get inspired there and ask some profound questions and really dig into leadership. And then the person gets the hot seat, and that's just it could be anything. We've had 2 people transition positions to new schools or from assistant principal to principal. And by having a variety of people that have held those different roles, they're just able to offer incredible feedback that people need to really, really think through and, like I said, process what they're going through. At the end of the day, again, it's all about community. You're going to be so much better off if you open up to people, if you regularly connect with them, you grow that trust and that that they have your back. And that's really the best part of the mastermind, to look forward every Tuesday to see these people, to meet virtually and to talk about your goals and aspirations. And then these folks really just hold you up on their shoulders and see you through, whatever you're trying to accomplish.
I look at it as kind of like a board of directors, right? And
absolutely,
the mastermind I'm a part of, there's people from all walks of life, from all over the country, from every different line of business you can think of. None of us have anything financially to do with one another. So like you said, it's non-biased advice. And, I've got some guys in my group who have an extra 10, 15, 20 years of experience that I don't have in business.
Yeah.
That have companies that are monstrous that I'm able to benefit from and learn from, but also people with different backgrounds and different, levels of success. And to have that group where you can go to get that honest feedback and to know that it's not going to impact you negatively in any way in your personal life is huge. And some of those guys have become some of my best friends, here in the last year and a half or so because of that, because we've taken time to get to know each other off, our video conference calls, and man, it's incredible. I wish I had learned about the whole concept much earlier, because I'd be even further along today had I had that experience.
You're so right, and that's a overlooked component, but the friendships that you develop, by spending all that time, regular and consistent time together, that's just such a great value from being in the mastermind. And the other point that I really want to flesh out for your listeners is the idea of acceleration. Again, we're probably all very smart and accomplished folks, and with what you're doing with School Spirit Vending, it's going to succeed, but it could succeed a lot faster. You could really accelerate that process by getting yourself in a diverse group in a mastermind that you can learn from. And that's why we invest in classes, whether they're online or on some type of campus. And that's why you should invest in your own self-development through a mastermind as well.
Good stuff. So anything else that you'd like to share, Daniel, with the listeners at all?
Well, if they haven't become a School Spirit Vending franchisee yet, they should highly consider that. I love what you're doing in making fundraising hassle-free. I know in schools, the budget is a challenging thing a lot of times. For example, our school just got cut $500,000, and that's going to be in personnel, and we're going to have to make some really tough decisions. So we could cut that all the way, right, and be able to still operate. But, the kids are going to suffer as a result. Class sizes are going to go up, and experts that we need in the building are not going to be there. So on the flip side of that, are there vehicles you can use to bring in income almost as a business? And I think School Spirit Vending is just a great solution to problems that schools have without a lot of work. You just have to open up your door and get that machine in there. It's a win-win for everybody.
Well, thanks for that, Daniel. I didn't. This is about you, man. But I appreciate that. What are the best ways that people can get with you and learn more about the mastermind, to learn more about the sprint, and of course to check out all the different podcast episodes with educational leaders from around the country?
Yeah, I would say just check out the blog, betterleadersbetterschools.com. You'll have an opportunity to opt into my email list. You'll get a newsletter. You'll get updates to the blog and the podcast. And then when there's openings in the mastermind or different services, opportunities I roll out, that's the best way to find out and make sure you're in the know. So that's betterleadersbetterschools.com. You can email me, Daniel@betterleadersbetterschools.com. And everywhere social media, my handle is Alien Earbud. So the story behind that, I'm an old English teacher. I love word games. And anagram is when you take letters in a specific word or phrase and you mix them around to create more words that are interesting to you. So if you take Daniel Bauer and you switch around the letters, you get Alien Earbud. And I like that image of the alien listening to his iPod, jamming out to some good music. And so that's why I chose that one.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so everywhere, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, you'll find me, Alien Earbud.
Who are a couple of the I know all of your interviews that you've done on your show have been tremendous, but who are a couple of the highlights that if people just had, a few minutes to check out a couple episodes to dip their toe in the water with what you're doing, what are a couple of the episodes that you would direct people to?
Yeah, that's a great question. Man, all of them. No. I think I really enjoyed one with Ken Williams. He's an education consultant, and he just really brought the fire in that episode. And really, like everybody I talked to about that podcast specifically, they talked about like it was getting their leadership bell rung, and they just felt so challenged by that. So Ken Williams is a really great episode to check out. Jennifer Abrams is another education consultant, and she's really big on like having tough conversations and how to navigate that. And I think they're hard to do, right? And they're very easy to ignore, but that just messes up the health of your organization. And so she's an invaluable resource and drops so much knowledge, for the listener. So check that one out with Jennifer Abrams. Just real quick, 2 more. I got the pleasure to interview John Mergendaler, and he is a high-level executive in the Buck Institute of Education, and he talks about project-based learning. That was a super interview. And one of the earliest ones I ever did was with a guy named Ryan Jackson, and I've really grown to like him a lot. He's in the Mastermind, and I consider him a friend. But this guy, he calls himself the underdog advocate, always fighting for kids that are often overlooked and underserved, and really just wants to bring them a high-quality education. And that guy, he's all passion about school. So that's Ryan Jackson.
Cool. Well, Daniel, appreciate your time, and thanks for being on the show, man.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure, and thanks for inviting me.
Hey, God bless you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, we would be honored if you would leave a 5-star rating and review and hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice.
Are you an educator, administrator, or school volunteer looking for a simpler way to raise money for your school? Let School Spirit Vending put their hassle-free year-round fundraising program to work for you. School Spirit Vending. We do all the work. You cash the check. Go to schoolspiritvending.com/school zone for all the details.